Hi, everybody. I am so excited to be doing this YA 2024 debut panel. We have a little bit, I don't know if anyone had noticed my naming conventions, but we've had a little bit of like genre blending today. So that's why I just said 2024 debut. I've loved doing these panels so much. I'm so excited for this. Um, During the panel, if you have any questions for the authors, please use the live chat, which I will remind people about periodically throughout the panel. Just in case you don't know who I am, my name is Lily. I am the moderator for this panel, obviously, and the face behind Utopia State of Mind on the internet. So we're going to have our authors introduce themselves, and then we are going to chat about the questions that I had immediately after finishing all of these books. So, Kristen, do you want to start?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kristen Randall. I use she, they pronouns, and I wrote the book, The No Girlfriend Rule. It's about a fat teen fan artist named Hollis Beckwith who tries to play a game like Dungeons and Dragons in the book called Secrets and Sorcery to prove to her high school boyfriend that she's worth keeping around after senior year. He has a no girlfriend rule in his own game, so she starts playing with a bunch of cool girls and finds herself, her best friends, and maybe a cute girlfriend along the way.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rita Feinstein, and I'm the author of Meet Me in the Fourth Dimension, which is a novel in verse. It's a contemporary with a light speculative element, and it's about a college freshman named Crosby who grew up in rural Oregon in a very new age, hippie, woo-woo sort of community. And when she goes to college, she goes without her best friend, who she's having a very devastating friendship breakup with. And the way that that manifests for her is she becomes deeply obsessed with this conspiracy theory that there's a rogue planet named Malachite on a collision course with Earth. And so the book sort of follows how she gets sucked into those conspiracies and just follows sort of the damaging consequences of misinformation, what that can do to people and their personal relationships.
Hi, I'm Carrie. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the author of Dead Girl, which is a young adult paranormal thriller. And we can talk about genre and blending because my book kind of runs the gamut. There's romance in it, obviously there's thriller elements in it, the paranormal. But essentially it's about a girl who grows up in Kentucky, and which is where I'm from. And are you from Kentucky?
I mean, I live in Covington, Kentucky. My book is also set in Kentucky. Okay, go ahead.
Stop!
Yeah, no, that's
I guess Lily knew that. I didn't know that.
Amazing. I love it. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, very cool. Okay. Anyway, so I digress. Where was I? Oh yeah, she's in high school. She's a sophomore. She's been bullied for as long, as she can remember, even elementary school, and she's an outcast. And but it's her sophomore year. She's excited because she had a great summer. She's hyped up. She has plans for the new year, and then things turn very poorly. And there's a deadly prank that she survives, which puts her on the radar of this heretical sect who's out to eliminate her, the abomination. So yeah, it's got a lot of things going on, and it's in Kentucky.
All right, and hi everyone. My name's Anthony Narada. I am the author of Skater Boy. Skater Boy follows my angry little punk named Wes, who falls in love with a out and proud ballerino, and it allows Wes to question where he is in the world and where he fits. My pronouns are he, him.
Perfect. We have such a joyful amount of like varying different stories in today's panel. So I just want to start off with a very basic one. I'm sure you all have been answering this like nonstop, but it's very basic, and it's take us through your debut journey from your book's idea, your first image of your book, all the way to release date.
That's a huge one. Who wants to jump into that first?
I think Carrie does because she's laughing.
I swear my journey is just so weird. I took the road less traveled. It makes no sense. Nobody should follow me on this journey. But I'm happy I'm here. I made it. Yeah. I didn't start like pursuing writing until like 2018. And even then it was just NaNoWriMo. And then we moved to Colorado. And so the pandemic, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward to, 2021, I finally get back to writing. And it was kind of like, starting all over. I'm like getting the writing books. I'm like, YouTubing. I'm doing all the things to try to figure out, how do you even write a story. And then one day the character just came to me, and then it was just like, off to the races. And then, after figuring out what do you do next, I did the beta reader things and all the normal things, and then started querying in 2022. But what I didn't understand, it takes a while. So I just, I've just kind of been marching to my own band here, doing my own thing. And so then I started querying small presses, got a deal for Dead Girl. And so here I am. So not the normal path, but, like I said, I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited to share my book with the world.
I can jump in next. I also started writing later in life. My hobby has always been writing, but I didn't take it seriously, whatever that means, really, until I wrote the No Girlfriend Rule. I drafted it for Camp NaNoWriMo.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, so like we have that in common as well. Drafted it. The story came to me because the book's about role playing, and role playing has always kind of been a place that I played with my own identity. So like telling this like romance, like love story, but also like a self-love story in the context of role playing just felt like a natural kind of place for me to play. Drafted it, did the whole like revise and like get beta readers thing, and then from there my story gets really atypical. I started querying. I connected with my agent during DV Pit, RIP DV Pit. Like it was kind of like she liked my pitch. I sent her my materials one night. She read it overnight. She offered the next day. Like, yeah,
awesome.
like really super whirlwind, got several other offers. And then like revised again and went out on sub and sold pretty quickly to Simon & Schuster. It's been amazing. Like at every step of the way, this journey has been not at all what I expected it to be. And I'm also really just glad to be here. Like, and this is my job now, that I get to write gay little books and have a good time.
Yeah.
I could go next, since I have sort of an opposite story to both of you.
Yeah.
So I have known since I was 10 years old that I wanted to be a traditionally published author.
Oh, yeah.
And it was the longest road, and at times the most crushingly demoralizing road, because it was something that I've always known I wanted to do. I was working toward it every day.
Yeah.
I like telling people that I queried for 14 years. So for those of you who are in the trenches, stick with it. It takes one. Yes, it will happen for you. But I did send my first query letter when I was 14 years old. I'm so glad I didn't get representation for that book. It was a mess. I adore that book with all my heart. Maybe I'll come back to it someday. But I didn't get an offer of representation until, 14 years later. And the book that my agent signed me for, like, we ended up having to shelve, which was also very sad. So the long road continued on finding.
Yeah.
And we were getting ready to send something else out, because one benefit of just having such a long journey is that I had a huge backlog of manuscripts that I was sitting at. And I was like, okay, that one's dead, but I'm not. Let's keep going. So we were going to send something else out. But then the pandemic happened. And I wrote Meet Me in the Fourth Dimension as just a way of like processing a lot of like personal grieving and just working my way through how the pandemic was affecting me. And I told my agent I was working on that project, but I also gave the huge disclaimer of like, but I'm not actually going to finish this, because like it's too painful, it's too raw. And she's like, no, you're gonna finish it. So I did, and we sent it out, and it was on sub for about a year before we got an offer. It's sort of a weird book because it's a novel in verse. It has a college age protagonist, so it exists in a lot of publishing gray zones. So that one had a long journey as well. But it ended up at the perfect home, who gave it this. Well, this is an ARC. I should have grabbed a hardcover. I don't know what I was thinking, but yeah, it's beautiful, and I'm so happy with how it turned out. And that's the story.
Rita, I'm glad you went before me because our paths are very similar as well. I started seriously writing back in 2010 with my very first novel, which was fantasy. I always thought I was going to be a fantasy writer. So I was writing and I was querying and failing miserably for 10 years. And I was on a road trip home with my partner. We had worked at Walt Disney World in Orlando for a year. And we were down there to represent Canada at the Canadian Pavilion in Epcot. And on the road trip home, we spent 5 weeks on the road because we were like, when are we ever going to get this chance again? So Skater Boy by Avril Lavigne came on the radio, and I was like, I have a really good idea. I'm going to flip the script and make this about two boys. It's going to be super gay. And I'm going to tell it from the perspective of the punk because no one has ever done that before. And I got home. We had this plan. We were going to get jobs right away so that we could, like get mortgages in this economy. And I was like, before we do this, I need to write this book because I have a feeling that this is going to be what will get me my agent. And so I finished writing the first draft of Skater Boy in 2 months. I queried it during DV Pit, and I got my agent then. Just like Kristen, I was like one of the trending tweets of that day. So that was really like super cool.
Amazing.
And so I signed with my agent really quickly then. And then I was actually on submission for 2 years before Skater Boy sold. So yeah, I reiterate what Rita said in that people who are querying and feel like they're down on their luck, like it could be just around the corner. So don't ever give up. And that's my story.
I love that we're both DV Pit people, but
I know
it feels good to just hang out.
Right? Rest in peace, DV Pit.
Yeah.
So sad.
Yeah.
That's why I love asking this question too, because I think that there are so many different paths and so many different kind of things that you think are going to go one way and then they don't, or it goes a completely different way and a good way too. All of your books are now also post pub date, so I want to know from you all, how has that post feeling been?
It's a journey. It's wild. I feel like my book came out on March 5th, and I feel like I'm finally maybe starting to come down a little bit from just the like overwhelming so muchness of it. It's been amazing. I mean, like I've been really lucky and I've gotten to do a bunch of cool stuff. Like just this weekend, I got to on Friday, I got to go do a school visit and stuff at my old high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really cool because I knew that I wanted to do this when I was in high school, but like had no concept that it was something that I even could do because I didn't know anyone who did it. And so it was really cool to get to go back to my old stomping grounds and be like, hey, I went to school here and now I do this. But no, I mean, it's been amazing and overwhelming and super exciting and just a lot. Right?
Not to mention that Kristen also hit the US Today's bestseller list.
I did.
Hello.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Yeah. It was
Do
not
the
that was
fireworks. Boom, boom.
Hold on. Is this the fireworks?
This is that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I did that. It's still I wonder if this tracks for any of y'all. I'm having trouble believing this is real life still. Like
Yeah.
just
Oh, yeah.
everything has been just the absolute coolest thing. And yeah. It's a ride.
Yeah, I will say that too. Like I was fortunate in the sense that my publisher sent me on a 5-city book tour during the week of my launch event or my
The
launch date.
fireworks.
Yeah, so it was really weird for me. Like I went from flying to a different city every day for a full week to just like coming home to my quiet little Canadian life. And like I was chosen as an indie next pick during that same week. So I was constantly posting, as I'm sure everyone was. And like I just came home, I had like the longest nap, and I just made sure that I jumped into edits of one of my next books because I was like, I need to get back into a sense of normalcy or this crash is going to be so difficult. Yeah, it's weird. It's like you have this out of body experience the entire time and you're like,
Truly.
oh, oh, there are new books coming out the following Tuesday. Like it's not about me anymore. Like it's such a weird insane world.
Yeah, I had a similar feeling. Like, it was very surreal. The whole building up to it. You got to do all the social media stuff, and you're just like, when will it ever get here? And then it gets here, and it's like, whoa! Like kind of like an out of body experience. Like, is this really happening to me? Like that's the book I wrote, but that's weird. It's like a weird kind of situation. And then I did the same thing, Anthony. I've been diving into this other story that's it's the bane of my existence. It's been 2 years I've been working on this thing. But it threw me out as soon as everything was kind of the big hurrah was done, like it threw my mind back into writing, which is what I wanted to do. I wanted to focus on that. So, but yeah, it's a really cool ride. I'll tell you, I want to get the next one out.
But yeah, I want to echo like all the feelings of just excitement and surrealism, because I had prepared myself. I was trying to manage my expectations, and I think I overcorrected. I was like, I'm going to feel so disappointed and depressed.
Yeah.
And my release was last week. It was March 19th.
Oh,
So like I'm still buzzing from it,
yeah.
but I think because I had prepared myself just to feel like numb inside, I surprised and excited. Like I went to a bookstore that I knew would be carrying it because we had arranged for me to come in to sign copies. And I still had this out of body experience when I saw it on the shelf. I was like, that's mine. I wrote that. I know that book. So I'm sure the crash is coming. I can feel inside that I'm extremely tired and I probably need to hibernate for a month. But right now, I'm still pretty hyped.
I had a bunch of authors tell me like the crash is going to be really hard, so make sure you occupy yourself with something you love. So I highly recommend getting all your favorite snacks and just prepare yourself in the event that it does happen. And if it doesn't, awesome. But if it does, just watch your favorite movies, play your favorite games. Like just self-care is so important.
I've got Animal Crossing on deck for when I get half a second to like actually stop and like unplug a little bit. I'm ready. Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome.
I'm playing Baldur's Gate, but I'm stuck in a fight I can't beat. So I don't know.
Oh no!
I know if I ever start playing Baldur's Gate, y'all will never see me again. You'll be like, whatever happened to that Kristen? They were so wonderful, and I will just be gone because that's book 2. Who I like that.
But yeah, right. What happened to her? Oh gosh.
So my next question is about character voice. That was one of the things I was thinking about as I was finishing all of your books. And so I want to know from you all how you maintain the character's voice throughout the editing, throughout the development process, the drafting process. And did you find your first image of them changed as you were going through this kind of editing process?
I could start because I had a fully different protagonist in the first draft of this.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, no, the seed of this idea actually started in 2018 because I knew I wanted to write about a new age crisis of faith, and I knew I wanted to have a character who was like a self-proclaimed psychic, just having their sense of self really shattered when they make a big prediction that doesn't come to pass. So I had that character concept, and the character that I was initially working with ended up just being like much more like passive and sad, and it just wasn't enough to give the narrative any propulsion. And the story really came together during lockdown. And I think like everything that I was feeling and everything that I was observing of the cultural moment just turned into this like anger that really defined Crosby's character. And it was so wild for me how she just like blazed onto the page as like a fully realized person, because I'm so not an angry person. But but that like needed to be at the center of who she was, those feelings of just being like misunderstood and betrayed, and those feelings of like deep conviction for her own beliefs, but also like masking deep insecurities about those same beliefs. So yeah, once she became a super unlikable, like not like other girls kind of girl, then like the character really felt fully realized.
I love that you said that because, and I was like, are our books the same? Because my character is such a little piece of crap. Like, he is so angry. He is so mean at the beginning. I'll say it at the beginning because, of course, he goes through a character growth and character arc. But um, I think, and I'm not an angry person at all. Like, people who have read the book, who know me intimately, are like, where did all that anger come from? But I think a lot of that anger stemmed from not seeing, or rather seeing the same gay character being told over and over again, which is wonderful, and those stories exist for a purpose. But I was always like, well, I am as angry as I am a grumpy character as much as I am a sunshine character. Like, where are the grumpy kids, and where are their stories that need to be told? And so I, like, my chapter one changed very, very minimally throughout my whole entire process because Wes's voice just was screaming at me right at the beginning. Mind you, I was starting writing Skater Boy as like a lighthearted rom-com, and it changed within like the first 10 minutes of me writing because he was literally screaming at me, and I'm like, okay, like, this is the story Wes wants to tell, so I have to like respect that. And people make fun of me when I talk about that, but they're not writers, so whatever. but yeah, like my the editing process, like, it was so easy in that regard because Wes's voice was so clear to me from day one.
Yeah, I had a similar experience, Anthony, where my chapter one, Hollis just showed up and she was just there, my main character Hollis, and just like the story that she wanted to be in. And I know I like that. I kind of feel kind of a little woo woo when I say that sort of thing. Like, this is just the story that Hollis wanted to tell.
Yeah.
But like, that's the truth. Like, that's she just showed up and like her voice was strong. I think I had a little bit more of, so like my book is in third person past tense, which is a little bit different than like the typical YA voice. So I had a little bit of wiggle room there, but like in terms of like revising and like making sure that I stayed true to that voice when I was like working through the book. But I think something that kind of kept me anchored in Hollis's voice is that I have anxiety too, just like Hollis does. And writing her character was the first time that I really gave myself permission to explore that on the page. So in a lot of ways, it was really, I don't know, like I got to go through a little like growth arc with her, like just letting her be anxious and letting that be her voice and letting those things stay in her headspace. And that kind of just anchored me in who she was, because she's a lot of wonderful things, and anxious is one of those. And yeah, I just let her do that.
I'm gonna seize the moment right now. My dog's been barking like crazy, and of course my son's down the basement asleep. So I was like, I can't get up. I know she wants to go outside. But back to my character and her voice, she came to be fully realized. I was very lucky in that sense. Like, I knew who she was. I had to dig to find out what made her that way. But I was very lucky in that regard. Her character arc does change. She goes from, not having very much self-confidence into, in the end, actually realizing her power and using it for good eventually. But she has some moments there. But yeah, I was very lucky that she, stayed pretty strong in my head throughout.
I just want to remind everyone that if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat. I want to talk about some book pairings, talk about some more themes in books. So I want to first talk about Skater Boy and the No Girlfriend Rule, because I think both of your books examine like the sense of friendship in unlikely places, and also what the power of new friends can mean to us. So I want to know from you both, what drew you to this theme, and how do you feel like these characters, you know, side characters explore or shed light on the main characters in the book?
Do you? Oh, I'll take. Okay, I'll take it away. So like I think the real answer is that I love found family. I feel like it's my favorite thing in the whole world. Like I love my found family in real life. It's my favorite trope. So it just felt like the place that I wanted to be. Part of Hollis's journey in this book is so she starts out with a really garbage friend group that she's kind of inherited from her really garbage boyfriend, and they put her down all the time, and just because where she's at, like with her like confidence in herself and with her anxiety, she's just like, okay, this is what life is. And then she finds this alternative with this wonderful group of girls who she plays secrets and sorcery with, and part of her journey is realizing, I think a lot of times in nerd space, we are told that we're like, to be cool, we have to be not like other girls. We have to be like the guy's girl. And part of Hollis's journey is that she realizes she's exactly like other girls, and that's awesome. And so having this wonderful group of like just like diverse, like totally different girls that she gets to hang out with. Like we've got like Gloria, the secret keeper, who is like got her life super together, and then we have her little sister Fran, who is just like a chaos goblin, and like we have all of these like wonderful weird characters that allow Hollis to realize like it's okay to be like kind of weird. It's okay to like genuinely like things and not have to do it ironically or whatever. Like it's okay to just show up as who you are and like love that person because other people will love that person. And I just like, it was important for me to have the girls there for her to learn that lesson. That's something that I didn't really come into until like after my teenage years. So I wanted to have that in a book so that maybe like other nerd girls out there can be like, oh, it's okay. Like I can hang out with other nerd girls and we're really cool and kick ass.
I love that. Yeah, and that's very similar to my answer too. Like I wanted to explore what friendships can do for you because I grew up with such close-knit friends, and I think that's why dialogue comes so very easily to me because I'm just so used to just being witty with my friends, and a lot of that stuff ended up being dialogue that's in Skater Boy. And what's fun about Skater Boy is that Wes starts off with this very solid group of guy friends, and of course boys are never told that they're allowed to express their feelings and say what they're really feeling. And so all three of them are all kind of struggling in their own way, but they have always grown up together. They're a very close-knit crew. And it's only when Wes meets this ballerino, I should say, when he meets Tristan, and Tristan really makes him question how he sees the world, and helps him and guides him to pursue a passion of photography, that he meets the photography club at school. And these are kids that are so lovely and so quirky, and maybe are people that Wes wasn't friendly to in the past, but who accept him wholeheartedly. And it's that lesson that Wes realizes that like those mistakes that he has made in the past, maybe he can be more than that. Maybe he can be more than the labels that he's been given, and he can explore friendships outside of the group that he has felt that he can only stay with because that's what the school identifies him as. So friendship for me was an exploration of identity more than anything. Yeah.
I feel like just tagging on to like what we've both said, I feel like found family and like your friend group, found family specifically, is so quintessentially a queer experience.
Totally.
And just like having a joyful group of queer kids in my book felt natural, felt like, of course, this is where Hollis is. This is where her story is told. So, yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, I love how in the No Girlfriend Rule as well, there's like a few scenes. And I think one of the scenes that kind of took me out of the reading experience in a good way was when when Hollis is experiencing like a situation of conflict in one space versus the other. I don't want to like say any spoilers, obviously, but in one space or the other, and it's modeled that it can be a different way. And I thought that was extremely kind of like, whoa. It just took me out of it.
Yeah, no, I mean like that's yeah, I'm glad that resonated, and that was really intentional to like provide those sort of like alternate. There's other options other than just being a big jerk about things. You can be like, you can have conflict and still stay friends and still like love and support each other. it seems revolutionary when I like it felt, I don't know, it's silly to say that seems like kind of a little bit of a like revolutionary idea, but it feels like that sometimes to me.
Yeah.
I was just
I think-
sorry, Lily. I was gonna say that friendship is a big part of Dead Girl, and that is part of her journey, realizing that it's okay to be who she is. And one of her goals for sophomore year was to have a friend that's a girl, and her name is Hallie, and she ends up being a good rock and kind of a inspiration, in the sense that Hallie isn't that concerned about what everybody thinks about her. She's not interested in being part of the cool kids, and that kind of what draws them together. And so part of my character's journey is to realize that it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to be different. That's actually what makes you special. And so her friendships are what kind of create that fertile ground for her to grow into that.
Yeah, and on the topic of friendship, I wanted to talk about Meet Me in the Fourth Dimension too, because you discuss friendship in like it's kind of crumbling, like kind of cracking. I don't know how you describe it, but like it's breaking down in a variety of different ways. And so I wanted to know if you could talk about that relationship within your book, and also what it was like to create that side character foil pairing, I guess.
Yeah, so Crosby is a character who's very susceptible to predatory conspiracy theories. And I really wanted to put a lot of thought into that kind of personality profile. So that was something I researched a lot. I can talk more about this later, but the conspiracy in the novel is very much an allegory for QAnon conspiracies. So I was tracking that whole phenomenon as it was playing out. And one common factor in like people who are susceptible to conspiracies or cults is just being very lonely and feeling very isolated and cut off from the world. And so I needed to have a character who just felt completely alone. And so the story opens when she's sensing like a pretty big rift between herself and her best friend Shannon. The two of them grew up sort of bonding over like doing witchcraft together, and Crosby is still like deeply into it, like with her whole self. And Shannon's like growing out of that, growing away from that, and not spoiling anything, but there's a lot more going on with Shannon that Crosby isn't aware of until the end of the novel. And so what Crosby has to learn is the ways in which she was pushing her best friend away through her attempts to salvage their relationship and to get closer to her. So Crosby's a character who needs to grow a lot over the course of the novel. But she has like at her identity, the core of her identity, like these real feelings of just being like different from everyone else, and better than everyone else in some kind of way. And so she needs to do some serious self-work and process and unpack that. And the people that she meets and becomes friends with over the course of the novel, the people who like give her grace, see that she's suffering, like see that she needs help, they reach out to her. And when she allows herself to reach back out to them and to open herself to their points of view, like that's where like her healing happens. So friendship's really important to this book too, but just like very, very fraught.
Yeah, I loved how there's this kind of gentle pushing and like gentle, not calling out, but like gentle questioning that I guess are happening from these other people in Crosby's life to kind of like sort of try to make change happen, and not just like, tell someone that something is wrong, like try to ask them questions, I guess, to like make it them find that journey on their own. And in Dead Girl, we talked a little bit about it before, but you talk about genre blending. So I wanted to know from you if you could chat about like merging like fantasy and contemporary spaces, and if there are any unexpected challenges doing that.
Yeah, I don't recommend it. No. I didn't know what I didn't know. Too much later down the line. Yeah, so I was initially pitching that young adult fantasy, which it is. Fantasy is a big umbrella genre, if you will, and you can have subgenres within it. And but the only paranormal kind of like genre that I was familiar with was paranormal romance. And so I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'm YA fantasy, but I'm paranormal romance. And then, whoo, if you've been watching any of this stuff online, the romance people are like, does it have a happy ever after? Then it's not a romance, blah, blah, blah. There's been a lot of controversy about what is a romance. So I was like, well, even back then I was like, okay, it's not a romance. And so like it took me a while to figure out what my book was, because when, like I said, the character came to me, the story just kind of, once I did some digging, it just kind of flowed. And I didn't realize that I had a book that was, encompassing all these different genres. And that would be a challenge when I started querying, but I didn't know that. So like I said, I just queried under YA fantasy. And it was after I got out of the trenches and had my contract signed that I realized this is why it was kind of hard, to get anyone to even read the manuscript, because how do you sell a book that is multi-genre, and young adult, on top, so yeah, I don't necessarily recommend it, but I have found that people of all ages are really enjoying it. Like people I wouldn't have considered a young adult reader, are giving me feedback that they really enjoy it. So there is a market for it. It's just hard to pitch it. So, I think a lot of people, when they do read the book, they're a little bit surprised, because a lot of people think maybe it's just a Carrie retelling, a girl that's been, bullied and become supernatural, blah, blah, like they kind of go down this path and then they realize there's so much more to it. And I think that's why it actually appeals to a broader audience than just young adult. But I don't recommend it. Know your genres first. Then decide if you want to do it,
Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying about, in some ways it being advantageous and in other ways it being really difficult to figure out how to pitch it, how to like succinctly, 5 bullet points or whatever, like summarize a book like that.
Yeah, it's tricky.
If I just wanted to remind people that if you have any questions, drop them in the live chat. I want to talk a little bit about something you mentioned earlier, Kristen, about like the space, the nerd space as well, because that's something that really deeply like resonated with me in the no girlfriend rule. And as someone who has like in the past also felt at various times kind of excluded from these spaces and conversations, I wanted to know if you could talk about your own experiences and how it impacts the book, and how do you use your book to talk about these spaces, and safe and accepting gaming spaces in general.
Yeah, sure. So, spoiler, I'm a huge nerd, and I've always kind of loved like big nerdy, like I've loved like D&D. I grew up doing like forum role playing, which I think is even nerdier than D&D. Just like fanfic, the whole 9 yards. And especially in like traditionally male nerd spaces like comics and D&D and stuff, I never felt comfortable. Like I never felt like I could really be part of the adventuring party. So I mean, there's this first scene of the book, the worst half session of Secrets and Sorcery ever played, where Hollis puts herself out there, gets very brave, finds like an open game of Secrets and Sorcery, which again is like Dungeons and Dragons, and sits down at this public table of the game, and just like it's like every bad stereotype ever is sitting with her. And that was based off of a real game of D&D that I played at my local gaming store when I was living in Nashville. It was very like, here's a femme presenting person. Let's throw them at the like the new kid table. So it was like me and like a 15-year-old boy playing a bard and like all of this like homebrew stuff. Just like it was like the worst game. Like it was very like very openly hostile. And I think as this book has like gone out into the world, a lot of like women and femme folks who read it have said, I've absolutely had that exact same experience. Like, so it is an unfortunate part of kind of nerd reality. I think that we are moving in a really good direction, especially like D&D has kind of spurred this like nerd revolution when it comes to tabletop gaming. And it has opened up in a lot of really exciting ways for like more queer inclusive spaces, more like women inclusive spaces, like that we see at Gloria's table in the game. And I just like, when I was like coming up in nerd world, I didn't know that that was even a thing that could like exist. So I wanted to put it out there that like you can find your nerdy friends, like, and you can play these really exciting and enriching games where you like, you can play with identity, you can explore like who you want to be as a person through this kind of like weird, fun, safe space of pretending to be someone else with all of your closest friends who are also pretending to be someone else. Like, and I think that it's just like, it's a really great place that is kind of like inherently queer. Like what's gayer than like pretending to be this kind of like fun, ideal version of yourself. Like Hollis's character is very like this, like, I think she even describes Honoria as Hollis, but better. Like, I don't know. So I wanted to kind of, I have come to find those spaces in my own life and wanted to put it out there for like the budding nerds. Like go find your people, find your ideal table, sit down and have a great time. Because it doesn't always have to be the Landons of the world who run the show. It doesn't always have to be, Landon is the antagonist of the book. I have not ever talked to anyone who has not wanted to punch this teenage boy in the face. So like it doesn't have to be run by the Landons of the world, whoever that might be. Find your Glorias, find your Anies, and play a good nerdy game.
Yeah, I just so deeply when I was reading the No Girlfriend Rule wanted to just like be sitting there and feel that like warm hug of a space. So I knew I had to talk to you about it and like ask you that today.
Yeah, it's in like when you find those people and you like you will, if you want to nerd out, you will totally find your people. It is that like it's that vibe. The folks that I play with now, it feels very much like sitting down at Gloria's table, and it's worth investing in yourself and finding those people. But I won't get on my big nerdy soapbox. Like I know like this isn't just exclusively like a nerdy panel. But yeah, like find your people and find that hug of a table. It's so worth it.
Something you mentioned, Rita, before about Meet Me in the Fourth Dimension, I want to chat a little bit more about, and this concept of belief misinformation, especially how it's becoming like more relevant, I feel like every day, you know, with these other spaces and these other sources, and how hard it can be sometimes to find like good sources of information as well. So for those who haven't read the book, could you introduce us a little bit more deeply into those topics and talk about your journey specifically writing this theme, which you've kind of like talked about a little bit before?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that the pandemic and the lockdown affected me like most intensely and personally was just seeing the effect that QAnon conspiracies and misinformation had on people in my life, but also society more broadly. And this phenomenon that already existed of people occupying just like their own universe on the internet was intensified because that's the only place that we lived during lockdown. We were just online. It was our only way of connecting with each other. And it really tapped into this deep existential fear that I've always had, which is just the subjectivity of the human experience. And just feeling like we're each going to have our own perception of reality and the truth. And there are some people where like you might never agree on the same truth. And that was just so unmooring to me. And so I really wanted to explore that in this book. Like, where do those divergences happen? And is it possible to connect with people who share a fully different version of reality with you. So in the book, I sort of channeled that into this conspiracy about Malachite, which is a rogue planet that NASA has assured everyone it's fully safe. You're going to see it. It's going to be a pretty little glimmer in the sky. You can see it with your telescope. We're totally safe. But Crosby falls into this dark corner of the internet that's saying we're all going to die. And so she becomes very radicalized by like that internet subculture, and it just absolutely destroys her mental health. So yeah, like I knew I wanted some kind of allegory for what I was witnessing happening with QAnon. And I modeled it partly after the movie Melancholia, which if you've seen it, it's also deeply scarring.
Yeah, that's one of those movies that I started to watch, and I think that this might be like a thing that I want to watch, and then just be like, I don't know if I can finish this movie. I don't know if like I can handle that as yeah. But I love what you said as well about like people occupying different realities too. You know, it can sometimes feel I think that's a really succinct way of describing that feeling about, you know, talking to someone and you realize that they're not something about their worldview or an opinion that they have is so vastly different from yours that it just really does feel like you're in like a multiverse all the time. I want to talk about bullying in Dead Girl and Skater Boy because I think that both of your books approach it from different lenses and like slightly different perspectives. So I'd love to know from both of you if you could talk about how you examine sort of high school character dynamics and the examinations of bullying and specifically like character arcs as a whole.
I'll start, Anthony. In my story, like I said, the character came to me first, and I was like, I had to dig a little bit to figure out, what made her that way, that who did that to you. And so I didn't set out to write a story about bullying. It just, happened. And it's kind of stayed true to who she was and how she handled those situations. And so I wouldn't say it's a prescriptive on how to handle bullying in the real world because I don't necessarily think that she handled it the best way. But it does kind of give you a glimpse. And my book also is set in 1990, so if you want to throw another curveball into the story, so it was a different time then, and the athletes were given kind of special favors, which may still be true today. I don't know, but so a lot of things went under the radar or brushed under the rug or ignored because of who she was, and so but it does play an important role in her character development, and she eventually learns to stand up to them, but in a better way than when she started the book. But again, I don't think it's like a recipe for how to handle bullying. Maybe Anthony, maybe yours handles it a little bit better.
I mean, I took writing Wes's character from the perspective of, like I was a diehard Gleek back in the day, and the bully storyline they had was just not for me. Like I was not for that storyline, and they didn't give that character enough of a redemption arc or even just an interesting story. And so I kind of wanted to correct that in my book as well, in that there's a really beautiful moment between Wes and the love interest Tristan, where Tristan is reading Paradise Lost by John Milton in a homework cutesy scene between the two of them, and he turns to Wes and says, like, you remind me of Lucifer, and Wes is like, I remind you of the devil, and he's like, and Tristan's response is that, well, Lucifer is the villain to God. Like, what does that make God to Lucifer? Like, it's all about perspective and how you see the world. And so I approached Wes bullying, and that was one of the most challenging parts of my book, in that I needed to write and craft a main character that people maybe had a visceral reaction to at the beginning, which was my intention. But someone who they like deeply understood and wanted to root for by the end of the book. Like that was definitely the hardest part of my book. But I wanted to show it from a point of view that Wes maybe was so suffocating under the label of being a bully, being a punk, that he just embodied that without really putting his heart into it. Not that bullies put their hearts into bullying people, but you know what I'm saying. Like he never felt he fit that label, but he was ascribed it at such a young age that he just felt he had to do it. And so he owns up to those mistakes in the book, and he apologizes for how he behaved. And I wanted it to be definitely an element of his character growth for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love what you said also about labels too, because I think that that's a book, that's something you talk a lot about, like whether or not we become something that people think we are, or whether or not we inherently are that. I think that you really beautifully kind of examined that in a variety of ways in Skater Boy.
Thank you, thank you. And I even mentioned in my dear reader letter right at the very beginning of the book, like when I came out, like I thought I had to embody that label of the gay guy. Like I had to love Broadway, I had to go to drag shows, I had to listen to Lady Gaga, and I'm like, I'm a punk head. Like I love like My Chemical Romance and like Fall Out Boy. So how do you juxtaposition like those two things together? And so yeah, my book is it explores labels in so many different ways, and it was very cathartic for me to write about that experience.
I would like to know from all of you, who is your favorite side character, and also who gave you the most trouble while writing, drafting, editing, whatever? Who is like the problem child?
Oh gosh. Don't tell Hollis, but my absolute favorite character in my whole book is Fran. I love Fran. She's the chaos little sibling, and I love her. I would die for her. I would kill for her. She's the best. The character who gave me the most trouble, if I'm going to be honest, was Maggie. Maggie for a little while was just kind of aimless and like had no real purpose. And she found her purpose eventually in kind of like making Hollis question like, why am I treating Maggie the same way that some of these other people are treating me? But yeah, she was for a while. She went through. I almost cut her a couple of times. Bless her heart. So sorry, Maggie. But yeah, that she was definitely my problem child.
My favorite and my problem child were the same character. So that would be Bailey, who is an astrophysics grad student at Oregon State, where Crosby goes to school. And he is the one who challenges her the most. He's very nice to her, but he pokes holes in everything she believes, and it drives her absolutely insane. And he was really difficult to write because he was the science to her mysticism. And me coming from an extremely new age family, like tarot and astrology were my whole identity as a teen. Like I knew Crosby's beliefs inside and out. I'm not a STEM person. I've never taken a physics class. I'm also not just like a very rational thinker, but my husband is. And he's extremely like exacting and precise. And so we would like role play these conversations between my characters. And I'll be like, okay, I'm going to be Crosby and I'm going to say something crazy. And I just want you to respond like however you would. And then I would like transcribe that. And so a lot of those conversations ended up in the book as Bailey's dialogue.
I guess I can go. I would say my favorite side character would be Wes's mom's like fiance, Tad. He is like a rocker, but like his rock band when he was younger was like was called the Incisors because of dentistry, and he's an accountant, and Wes just thinks he's the most boring person in the world. But he ends up being like really integral to Wes's forgiveness in the book, and I thought his story my editor really pulled me and really encouraged me to like pull out more about him. And as I went through it more and more, like I loved him so much. I cut one scene where he was like big into crocheting, so he had like a leather jacket just like Wes, but like one sleeve was like crocheted. And I had to cut it unfortunately, but I just think he was so super cool. And then I would buckle down and say that my most troubling character was Wes because I'm like a sunshine kid, but he pulled out all the grumpiness in me, and I really had to dig deep to understand why he was so mean.
This question makes me a little bit emotional, but I'll try to keep it together. My favorite character is Eric, ERCK. The real Eric is no longer with us, but his character is based off the real Eric that I went to school with, and he was a really good friend of mine. And sorry, he's exaggerated in the book, but that core friendship is real, and so it made it really easy and kind of cathartic writing his role in the story. So, and the worst character was the bully for sure. Because most everybody's been around one of those guys, and you're like, why can't you just be nice? Like, but having to write those mean words and it wasn't my favorite, but yeah.
I always felt really slimy after I wrote Landon. Like I felt like physically gross. Like I need to go take a shower after I wrote all of these like awful things that Landon says. I feel you, is what I'm saying.
I am so sad about that crochet leather jacket, though.
Right? Where can I get one in real life? I would like to find out. I'm joining the waiting list immediately.
He had like a crochet bow tie at one point. I'm like, this guy is so cool. Like, how could Wes not like him?
In the movie adaptation, we'll make sure to include those.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I want to know how you all procrastinate when you should be writing but are not writing. Maybe you're crocheting.
I could never. I'm not coordinated enough.
I will say that my house gets really clean when I'm procrastinating. All of a sudden now I want to do the dishes. Oh, look, there's a pile of laundry. Yeah, the house gets clean.
Yeah, I do that one too, for sure. And like, I think maybe unfortunately a lot of my other hobbies that I have are also very writing based. So if I'm not writing like book stuff, I'm like, I'm not going to write real things. I'm going to screw around and write a D&D campaign instead. So I just end up writing all the time, which is kind of silly, but that's what I do.
No, I feel that. Like every single thing I do is text based. And I'm like, I need to do something that's not staring at words. So I went to Michael's the other day and just like went into a fugue state and spent like $150 on fake flowers. So now I'm like crafting these flower hoops. So that's how debut week is going.
That's amazing. I love that. Not to be like a gym bro, because I do not associate myself with being a gym bro, but I work really long hours during my work day, and it was all honestly like working here till 6, closing that laptop, opening this one to edit. So I started going to the gym during my lunch break just to get away from a computer because my eyes were so sore, and that just ended up being the way that I like got out all my energy, which is bizarre. And if you had told me that 5 years ago, I would have laughed at you.
I get that. I go for little walks too. Like if I'm really like, okay, I just need to get away from the book. I will go for a 1 or 2 hour walk and just wander around the city. And yeah, so it's nice to move around your body and to like get your sillies out.
Get your sillies out. I love that. I'm gonna use that.
Isn't there a Raffi song?
Yeah, I think it's like for little kids. My part-time gig is at a library, and I work mostly in the children's department, and we all say like you got to get your sillies out, you got to get your wiggles out. Yeah. So I can't even claim cute. That one. Yeah.
So instead of like working out at the gym, you're just like wiggling.
I just go on silly little walks. I love a silly little walk around the neighborhood. But I am known to I also am a punk rock gay, so I will walk around with my little headphones in and like bop and like sing to myself, and I am shameless about it. So
Yes.
Oh, okay. I want to ask one more question, but I quickly want to say that one of my deepest regrets recently has been that as a teen, I like gave away all my old band shirts. And so now I've been trying to find like vintage My Chemical Romance t-shirts online.
They're hard to find because
They're hard to find. The sizing is
of it all.
wonky. Like it
Yep.
just is hard.
Yeah, I get it. I was a bit of a pack rat, and like I have like a big like one of those giant storage Tupperwares of all of my old band shirts from when I was a wild youth back in the day. So
Oh, you're living my dream. Okay.
I grew up in Nashville before Nashville got cool, and so there were like it's another tangent. It's another book, maybe. But I went to cool like indie shows like 3 nights out of the week when I was a teenager, and it was amazing. And yeah,
so cool.
Yeah, it was great. Loved it.
Okay, so my final question is: if you had to have your book if your book had to be a different title, what title would it be? Like it has to be. I don't know. It's been like copyrighted or something. It has to have a different title.
I have an answer for this that is like goofy. It's not goofy. So when I queried this book, I did not query it as the no girlfriend rule. I suck at titles. I am very blessed that my agent is very good at titles, and I am not. When I queried this book, I queried it as Playing Secrets and Sorcery with Girls. So I guess that would be its alternate title, because it's very like you get what you see on the box, but it is a mouthful. So yeah, I guess Playing Secrets and Sorcery with Girls would be my alternate title. It was for a long time. So thank you, Becca Langton.
My book was originally called He Was a Skater Boy, but for copyright reasons, we obviously changed that.
I will say that I also stink at titles. And my book was originally one of the early drafts is called Created, because it kind of alludes to she wasn't necessarily born this way normally. So, yeah, I don't have a good alternate title. I wish I did.
Yeah, no, I don't have a fun answer either, because this was always the title. But I guess having something shorter would have just been more efficient and made my life easier. Because whenever I have to tell somebody what my book is, I'm like, all right, I'm going to take a deep breath. So maybe a one-word title would have been nice.
But like kudos for nailing it on the first go, though. Like titles are. I would rather write a synopsis than come up with a title.
That's insane.
I would rather write about 500 synopses than come up with a title. So very.
Hang on a second.
I hate titles. I hate, like, if I could just use song lyrics for titles for the rest of my life, I would be a happy camper. But
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
No,
seriously,
I love titles. I'd do anything to avoid writing a synopsis ever again.
I know. I was there with you with the not coming up with a good title until you said the synopsis. I was like, hold up.
that's how bad I am at them, so.
Oh wow! I think I'd rather write a synopsis.
My other piece of advice for those of you still in the query trenches is, if you were like me and you thought once you had an agent, you'd never have to write a synopsis again, I'm sorry. That's not true.
Unfortunately, yeah, like you have to write them. It never stops. And you just have to put them in front of more and more impressive people. Like I trust my agent with all of my stupid, like, I just pooped this out on a napkin while I was eating chicken wings kind of thing. But now that I have to send it to like my editor, who is like really fancy, it's awful. Yeah. Always be writing a synopsis.
Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you to everyone for chatting. I've left everyone's book links in the description box below. So please go do all the magical things about them and go add them to your TBR, pick them up and everything. I hope you all have a really great rest of your day and that we can continue enjoying this like giant debut 2024 panel series.
Yeah, this is us. Thank you so much for having us all. This was absolutely a
Yes,
blast.
thank you. So much fun.